But anyway, Peter Hitchens is here. You remember the summer of 1976, no doubt.
I remember it very well, yes.
When it was as hot as it is now, but we weren't being given constant warnings about how to avoid dying.
No, but we had a Minister of Drought.
We must have had one, yes.
We had a minister, almost about 2 days after he was appointed, the heavens opened. And it was amazingly effective.
Thereby proving
that appointing a Minister of Drought was the right thing to do.
It really is astonishing.
Dennis Howell, I think it was.
Was it? Yes.
I think so, who later became, or had already been, Minister for Sport, which in those days seemed a very odd thing.
Yes.
We didn't have all these ministers for weird things in those days.
No. I mean, I saw a couple of resignations last week of ministers that I didn't know existed.
There was
I
saw about 40.
Well, there was a woman who was Minister for Climate Adaptation.
There you are. Then.
Right? Now, I don't even know what that is.
Well, I think it's what's just brought down the government in Ceylon.
Well, very possibly so. What is going on there? That's a
apparently
fascinating story.
they've refused to use fertiliser or something because they've gone all organic, and as a result, there's not enough food.
Isn't it funny how this little net zero mania seems to be driving economies into the sea?
Yeah, exactly. The Germans, who had gone completely round the bend, have backed away from that.
Yeah.
Gone back.
They've gone back to coal.
They had never stopped coal, but they've stopped dismantling their nuclear power.
Yes.
They realised that if they carried on as they had been, the place would go dark. Mind you, Germany is now saying it's going to ration heating, close swimming pools, and all kinds of things in the coming winter. And I have to say, I wonder how long it's going to be before people have to wonder about that here.
Yeah.
Because the Germans are in competition with us for the gas that doesn't come from Russia.
Yes, quite. And of course, the fracking argument continues here without really making any progress. We still hear that there's another review, but nobody's actually getting closer to
I have my severe doubts about fracking in a country of this size. I think there is a real problem with the way that it pretty much destroys water. I'm not sure about the earthquake side of it, but the very heavy use of water, which then can't be used for anything afterwards, is quite a severe problem. It seems to be in a huge landscape, as they have in the United States, where these things can be done far away from people. It's one thing, but in a densely populated landscape like ours, I'm not sure it's going to be quite so easy. So I'm always a bit suspicious of that lobby.
Yes, I mean I have no skin in the game, as they say. I mean I'm not convinced really either way, but my sense is it's never going to happen.
Well, it might happen because it has to. That's the thing. I wouldn't rule out the reopening of coal mines on a large scale before the century.
Because the electrification, I suppose, if you like, of everything, never seems to take account of where the electricity is going to be generated from.
Well, if the electric car is successful, we simply will not have enough electricity to charge them all.
Yeah.
Though quite why it should be successful, every account I read, there was quite a good one at the weekend. Every account I read is somebody who actually tries out an electric car. It's incredibly difficult to get them to get above a certain range, and it's incredibly difficult to recharge them.
Yeah.
And once people have begun to have this experience in large numbers, who's going to buy them? And then there's the other thing, as I said, if everybody has them, where are we going to generate the power to charge them? It's a huge amount of power.
And also, the more people who need to find a charge point, the more difficult that becomes, because everywhere you go where they've now built in some charge points, say, for example, in underground car parks or in sort of shopping areas and that, there's only ever no more than 6 of them.
Yes, and people say they compare them to petrol stations, but you're in and out of a petrol station in a few minutes. Right. But at a charging point, it's a very long time indeed, and no one's overcome that problem. The other simple point is this, that the electricity to charge up the batteries has to be made generally by polluting power stations. So the whole idea that they're green is a complete delusion.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I was mildly amused by Gloucestershire Police's purchase of 66 Nissan Leafs, which they've now worked out are completely useless in Gloucestershire because it's a bit rural there. They didn't know that, apparently, and there's nowhere to charge them.
Well, I keep telling you they don't go up much.
Now that they've suddenly discovered that Gloucestershire's quite rural, you kind of go, what?
Well, there's one bonus from this. They have actually found out where Gloucestershire is and what it's like, which previously they probably didn't know.
But they'll probably now have to sell on the Nissan Leafs.
And then they might be able to afford the ideal police vehicle.
Yes.
The bicycle.
The bicycle, yes. Well, funnily enough, I was going to talk to you about bicycles because this morning we were talking about the Metropolitan Police all but decriminalising theft not only from cars but also of cars, because there's an awful lot of people having things stolen from their cars.
Yes.
I was suggesting that soon people will probably have petrol siphoned out of their cars because it's actually the most valuable thing.
Is this not happening? I mean, the theft of catalytic converters from cars.
That was a thing for a while.
Which still is. It still is a thing.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that as the price of petrol goes up, siphoning will become...
well, I mean, you're talking about stealing effectively £100 worth of goods, aren't you?
Yeah, but decriminalising is what the police do. They fiddle the actual crime figures by pretending things haven't happened, or merging 30 crimes into one, or whatever it is they do. And there are lots of techniques. I got jeered at for writing about this a few years ago, and had the great pleasure of seeing everything I'd written vindicated by the House of Commons Home Affairs Committee. They do fiddle the crime figures.
Yes.
But the other thing they do is they simply ignore crimes completely.
Yeah.
They don't. They're shoplifting people have known for years. They won't turn out for car thefts, burglary, all the rest. They're not.
Well, we've got 1 million unsolved burglaries, haven't we?
Yes, and that figure is not going to go down.
No.
The number of new burglaries will rise much faster than the number of sold burglaries.
We actually had a guy call us, or text us, I can't remember exactly what, a couple of weeks ago, to say that they reported a burglary having come home from holiday at 7:30 in the evening. At 10:30 in the evening, they got a call from the police saying that they'd closed the case.
Well, that's efficiency for you.
It was brilliant. But he said, well, hang on, you haven't done anything.
Oberyn Moore said years ago, and it was a brilliant observation, that the police had stopped being a police force and had become a national crime reporting organisation. Yeah. And that is pretty much what they are.
And it's amazing that he was saying that so many years ago, because now it's even worse.
Oh, it's much worse, but they are at best an adjunct to the insurance industry.
Yes. And you've had a bicycle stolen.
Oh, good heavens.
There's an awful lot of that going on as well.
Well, it was stolen virtually in my presence.
Was it?
Well, I just I'd propped up my bike outside the block of flats I lived in London at the time, and I suddenly dashed back upstairs to get something. And as it happened,
and you hadn't locked it up.
I was also it took too long, and as it happened, I was carrying in one hand a bag of laundry.
Right.
And I came down to see my bike being ridden off, not by some
lithe
youth, but by a middle-aged man with pepper and salt moustache and a tweed jacket. And he was going, and I made the terrible mistake of shouting after him, I think, "Stop thief" or something unoriginal, and I gave chase.
Right.
And he alerted to the fact that I was chasing him, managed to get a bit of speed. It was a terrible old bike. And I still caught up with him enough to biff him round the head.
Oh, well
4 or 5 times with the bag of laundry. And I can tell you that a bag of laundry is completely useless as a blunt instrument.
Yeah.
He staggered a bit and wobbled, but he did not come off. And then he really found his feet and zoomed off.
Wow.
Down to Kentish Town, and I never saw the bike again.
Yeah.
It's a great tragedy, but I do lock them more carefully.
I had a bike stolen once years ago, but it was actually chained up. I can't remember. I think they just cut the chain.
That can happen too.
You see people doing it. You see kids going around with these sort of, bolt
croppers, and there are all kinds of wonderful things they can do. Like they can freeze the lock so hard that it becomes brittle.
Yeah. It was funny actually, because I was walking into work today, and my son's with me doing a bit of work experience, and I had to explain to him that while walking through the streets of London, you now have to look basically 365 degrees in all directions before you cross any road, because anything could be coming at you from almost any angle, whether it be, and just as I said it, one of those scooters whizzed by that way, and then a bike came the other way, and then somebody sort of running came. It's chaotic now.
Yeah, it keeps you
total chaos.
It'll certainly mean that all the slow people are eliminated probably by about 2030. There won't be any slow people left.
There won't. There absolutely won't. Let's talk a bit about the what you wrote this weekend about the useless and the pointless, which I thought was rather good. A good point, well made.
Yeah, no, it was. I just felt that Johnson is useless. But the people who got rid of him were pointless. It was impossible to find myself taking sides in this, or feeling particularly grief-stricken. I just there is nothing there. I've always said he's very nice to meet, and women in many cases love him. In some cases, too much. Yeah. But there's nothing there. And I said he was like, I don't know. Do you read the works of P.G. Wodehouse or watch even the TV versions? He's like Bertie Wooster, but with no Jeeves.
But without the Jeeves. Yeah, that was interesting.
Bertie Wooster with no Jeeves, and there's nothing. There's no seriousness there. There was never any purpose. I remember those great screeds he used to write for the Daily Telegraph at about £1 million a word. That they used to, when people used to say how wonderful they were, and I would force myself to read them, and I'd come out of the other end and think, well, what was that about?
Yes.
And I attended his speeches. It was the same. Once you'd heard 2 of his speeches, And by the time I got to the end of it, I must have heard about 20. Again, you realise it was all flash and glitter and fireworks,
yes.
but there's no there.
No substance. It's a bit like listening to somebody...
What's gone, you see? Nothing's gone except a very, very popular man.
Well, I found myself thinking this morning as I came in, as you do, sort of thinking of a theme for the week. It's a bit like having nobody in charge, really. There's not much difference. If we had nobody in charge, would it actually be any different? If we didn't bother getting a new Prime Minister, would it matter?
Well, something's in charge. I think there is a political class in charge, and they run so many things. They run all these quangos, which interfere in our lives. They even run the shops, which you must have noticed the way the supermarkets deluge you with propaganda. They run all the organisations which constantly pester you about global warming and how you've got to behave in certain ways about that. And they are not stopped or hindered by the government. I'm always amused when people say that if a Prime Minister goes on holiday or is ill, who is running the country? Prime Ministers don't run the country. At the best, they run the government, and that's if they're lucky. The country runs itself in a sort of way.
But you sort of
But at the moment, the governing elite which we have, which is installed in all important places pretty much, from HR departments in wherever you work, to local government, to Ofcom and the Quangos, they're all the same people, and they all think the same thing.
There's a lot of them.
There are a lot of them. They are the people I was at university with, just as the universities began to expand, and there will be more.
Unfortunately, they're not the people your parents warned you about.
No.
I wish they had warned us.
They're around too.
Peter Hitchens is here. We've got lots to do. We haven't taken any of your calls yet, but we will, so please do be patient. We will get to you, of course, because we have an awful lot to talk about. But the question really is, you know, all of these people who are lining up to run to be the Prime Minister, who are telling you now what they really believe, but they couldn't say before because of cabinet responsibility. You know, it's all just a crock of nonsense, isn't it? Do you really believe it? Do you? Well, maybe you can convince me. We're talking about the theft of cars and things stolen from cars. It seems to happen an awful lot. I want to know what happened, if it happened to you. Burglaries are not being investigated, says Yvonne, but I had bailiffs turn up at my house for driving 20 yards into the congestion zone due to a new no right turn policy, forcing me to drive in solely to turn around and leave. This is what's going on now, isn't it?
Yes, but under Labour it'll be a no left turn policy.
Presumably so, yeah.
Careful which way
I just
you go.
saw Keir Starmer talking about how he was going to change Britain, and I could only stand about 35 seconds of it before I had to switch it off.
Well, the trouble is you should listen carefully because he probably means every word.
Yeah, but again, he speaks without saying anything. He doesn't. He said, "This is why."
I keep warning you about Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer is a Pabloite. He is a red-green Euro-communist.
Yes.
And he has terrible plans for you, which he.
I'm sure he does.
That's after, of course, he's reformed the voting system.
But this is the problem, is it not?
Put himself permanently in power.
Yeah. Well, the way that one of the scenarios goes is that he gets into some kind of coalition government with the SNP. The SNP then get, as a result of that, independence for Scotland. Labour then are in control because they can have the majority in England only, because they can't really get anywhere in Scotland.
There's a more interesting variant on that. He made that speech a few days ago in which he pretty much cheesed off about half his own voters by saying he wouldn't leave the European Union or the single market.
Right.
Now, why would he do that? I think it's because he doesn't really care about losing those votes. In fact, he would quite like to see a big Liberal Democrat vote in the next election. He knows he can't win it, but he knows that a big Liberal Democrat turnout is the biggest danger to the Tories.
Yes.
He could then form an alliance with them.
Right.
And everything I hear suggests that will then lead to another election on proportional representation.
Yeah.
And once we go to proportional representation, you'll never have a Conservative government in this country again.
And there's a lot of voices in favour of proportional representation.
Well, they don't understand what it will mean. That's why they're in favour of it.
But we once had a referendum, didn't we, on something that nobody understood?
Yeah,
which
but
was that sort of what was it called?
AV.
AV. That's right.
Yeah, it was. No one put any oomph into it. It was designed, I think. It was one of those rockets designed to fail, and it duly did.
And it was almost impossible to explain as well.
This time they won't do a referendum.
Yeah.
This time it will be part of the deal he does with the Liberal Democrats. I'm guessing, and then they will just put a bill through and quite possibly abolish the House of Lords.
Yes.
And replace it with the Senate as well. And there will be an election. Everything will change.
Yeah. Well, you've been right about most of this stuff before, so
I try to be.
People should be very wary of that. But what would be the time frame for all that, then?
I don't know, but I think that if it turns out, because Blair was actually quite disappointed to have that huge majority in 1997, he and particularly his great mentor Roy Jenkins have been hoping that the Lib Dems would form part of the government so they could then move on to proportional representation. But of course the Labour victory was so huge.
Yeah.
In 97, they didn't need the Liberal Democrats, so he couldn't persuade his own party. And anyway, at that time, they thought they would win everything. But you look at Labour now, they struggle to win seats in the south of England.
Yeah.
And it's very, very hard to see how they can get an absolute majority in England alone. And with Scotland largely gone to the SNP, they need some other way of getting there.
Yeah.
And I would have thought proportional representation is it. If you were on the left in this country, you'd want proportional representation. It would break up the Tory party almost certainly, and it would make it impossible.
But interestingly, in Scotland,
to be the
where
government.
you would have thought that might also lead to a more broad church of kind of government, so that you'd have a lot more coalition government. They are in some kind of ragtag coalition with the Greens now, the SNP. But by and large, the SNP have just waltzed in and now more or less have everything. I'm told the Labour Party up there are coming back a bit because of Anna Sarwar, who's quite a good, decent individual. But, it hasn't led to what I would have thought would be more that kind of chaotic form of government.
No, that is because the SNP is so totally dominant, which normally in a system with alternative members, which is what we'd end up with, which is what we have in London.
Yeah.
And also in Wales, it's the chosen system ever since the Blairites started messing around with the regional votes.
Yeah.
If you have that system, generally it won't come up with that result. It's pretty much designed to prevent anyone getting an overall majority.
Yes, and to get rid of the House of Lords, what would need to happen? Surely there would need to be some kind of constitutional change, wouldn't there?
I honestly don't know whether you. Ultimately, see, the House of Lords is the guardian of the Parliament Act, which is the act which says how often elections should be held,
right.
And therefore it's a very dangerous thing to get mixed up with. But I don't think there's any rule in the Constitution against reforming it. And the Blairites chucked out all the hereditary peers. Macmillan brought in...
Apart from, bizarrely, 99 of them, right?
Well, exactly, but that was just one of those little sentimental concessions which made the major task easier.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether there's anything to stop them. And I think a lot of people looking at the state of the House of Lords, especially since Cameron crammed it with all those people, would say, who's going to weep over getting rid of it? Why not elect it?
Yeah.
I mean, there are arguments against it, but I'm not going to waste my time here or yours going through them. But I think you would find a lot of people saying, "Yeah, good idea. Let's have an elected state."
There's an awful lot of Lib Dems in the House of Lords, more than there should be. Really.
Yeah, well, but it's very difficult to justify in any way now. You used to be able to say, when there were a lot of hereditaries in it, that there were a lot of people who owed nothing to any government and therefore couldn't be browbeaten into voting the way you wanted them to, which was a good thing. Now you can't say that.
No.
It's full of people who owe favours to the party.
I mean, I was down there, funnily enough, unexpectedly. I was invited for lunch, and we were walking through one of the lovely, beautiful old corridors. It is a magnificent building, isn't it? No matter what you might say about what happens inside it. And as we approached this corridor, these sort of men came out of a room, and it was Claire Fox I was with, and she said, "Oh, that's the bishops." And you just kind of go, "What are they doing? And why are they there?" And, in this day and age, what's it got to do with them, how we run the country?
Oh, well, I'd argue very strongly that they should be there.
Yes, well, you would. Well, finally we found
but
something
on
to
the other hand,
disagree
I
about.
would say that they would need to justify themselves much more than they do. You need much better bishops.
I'd prefer it if they believed in God.
Well, there is always that.
I mean, I don't particularly feel religious, but I mean, I feel as if they should be.
They should be more religious than they are. You wouldn't. There's no sign. Whenever people say, "Oh, well, this is really a theocracy. It's got bishops in Parliament," I say, "Okay, you give me one instance of the bishops of the Church of England voting as a body, or even the majority of them voting for any socially or religiously conservative measure."
Yes.
And I'll buy you a drink, because there is no such.
Welby himself has been quoted as saying he's not even sure there is a God.
Well, nobody can be sure, because unless he comes to visit you, and the ones you need to worry about are the ones who are certain.
Well, I suppose so, but I would feel somehow more comfortable with an archbishop who was sure that there was a God.
Well, this isn't
This
isn't a theological program, and I think it's best if we keep it that way.
Okay. Now, have you been appearing on the BBC since I saw you last?
No, I had a cameo appearance a week ago, but apart from that, no.
No.
But
So your sort of counsel was not sought over the departure of a Prime Minister?
I'm shocked to say that no, even for a moment asked my advice over that, no.
No. Well, anyway, Julian Assange remains in prison.
He does.
He hasn't moved anywhere yet.
Well, there are no burglars there. There's plenty of room to keep Julian Assange.
And he probably smoke as well. Any movement on that front at all?
Not that I can see. I mean, it's supposed to. The Court of Appeal, I think, has the next decision to take, and this is. I find myself conflicted here because if they don't take it up, and if it doesn't get taken up by the English legal system, then I think that we may well have to find ourselves relying on the Human Rights Court in Strasbourg. Now, I would not normally do that. There was one previous occasion when the case went before them when I thought that it was right that it should, because the English courts wouldn't do anything about it, and that was over the closed shop. The first time I went to Strasbourg, actually, back in the, I think it must be in the early 80s, and they ruled very much in favour of people being free not to join a union, which I thought was an important thing. But it should never have fallen to them to do it, just as it should never fall to them to sort out this wrangle. But it might have to go there for there to be a judgment. And if they ruled against the extradition, I think it would be very hard for the government to send him to the USA.
Yeah, I think so.
But it could be a long time before it winds its way there.
Yeah, I suspect so. Peter Hitchens, Mail on Sunday columnist, of course. Very good to see you. See you at the same time next week.